You spoke today about the fact that you have started recording 30 years later the survivors' interviews and about the feeling you got as soon as you became director that time is running out.
Time is the enemy. Time is the enemy, and time is the enemy to you, time is the enemy to us.
Why did it take Bosnia first this long? Because you started, Qendrës Memoriale started recording interviews with Birn Bosnia only in 2021.
We started already in 2020.
2020?
Yeah. Why did it take so long? Well, I don't know. I mean, I could spend the rest of this conversation talking about everything that has gone wrong.
Let's talk about why people were so willing to talk after 25 years. Is that also got something to do with it? It's just because you asked?
Exactly. That's another thing. I mean, in '96, nobody would have talked to us, or far fewer people would have talked to us. It was much fresher. It was a lot more difficult to talk about it. Now, you know, 29, almost 30 years later, there's almost like a need. People need to unload themselves.
But you also spoke about, in the press conference, about insisting on telling your narrative and not complaining about Serbia's propaganda.
Who cares about it?
I mean, you are not affected because, hang on, you are the most hated person on Twitter by Serbs. You are attacked, you walk around with a bodyguard. How come you are not affected by that?
My father went to the front line unarmed, just to fill the number, just so that there is another body. And he died. He was killed.
What year?
1992. So if my father could have done that, and so many others with him, what's a few threats? I am dedicated.
But you were a journalist for a long time, writing on war crimes. You are getting death threats now, when war has been over 30 years ago.
Yeah, well, there's a
What's
war
going on right now?
In the words of late Abdullah Sidran, what goes on right now is the war for the interpretation of the war. And I am a very willing participant, because as long as I'm alive, I will do everything I can to ensure that this thing goes down in history the way it should go down in history. You know, I've been thinking about that on the way here, about Kosovo and Bosnia and what we have in common, and Albanians and Boshnjaks. And I realized that among many things that we have in common, there is one that stands out, which is that for the last 100 years, probably even more, both Albanians, Kosovarës, and Boshnjaks were defined by their enemies. And I don't use the word enemy lightly. I am referring to a particular state formation that has a history of trying to wipe out Albanians from Kosovo and Boshnjaks from Bosnia and Herzegovina. They have been writing the history of World War I. They have written the history of World War II, even though they were among the most willing collaborators of the Nazis. Belgrade was one of the first Judenrein cities in occupied Europe. Not this time. Not this time. No, no. That is long gone. So they can forget about teaching young Albanians and young Boshnjaks that their grandparents were killed because they were terrorists. They can forget that. Because, hey, you know, there's a whole generation now in Bosnia, and I'm pretty sure there's a whole new generation here in Kosovo who are not prepared to take it, who are not prepared to bow down. We're not going to do that. Bosnia is our country. It's our history. We're going to write it. Who do they think they are?
You said something also that you are insisting to write your history. We have to be focused in telling our story, but it's also it is expensive to remember and it's cheap to forget.
Yeah, forgetfulness or forgetting.
What do you mean by it's expensive to remember?
Okay, let me
explain.
Let me tell you this. I have literally calculated that the amount of money that you need to dig a mass grave is somewhere between, let's say, 500 to 700 euros. So what you need is an excavator, a few hundred liters of oil, and a guy willing to operate the excavator. And that's it. That's all you need to dump several hundred bodies into a grave and bury them. Now, let's look at this process from the other side. Let's imagine we found a mass grave, okay? So, in order to identify the individual mortal remains that we found in a mass grave, we have to have available some of the most expensive science in the world, which is DNA technology. Then imagine that in that mass grave we found an artifact, let's say a pair of glasses. In order for that pair of glasses to be, let's say, displayed in a museum, in a case, you need to conserve it. In order to conserve it, you have to have a conservator. It's probably one of the most expensive educations you can get anywhere in the world. It's a very rare expertise. You have to have a proper place for this person to work. You have to have a proper table for this person to work. You have to have the proper chemicals. You have to have the person who knows how to use those chemicals. And then you have to finally find and buy a museum case, which is also expensive, and put it in a museum case along with the story about these eyeglasses. That's a lot more expensive than digging a mass grave.